Let's acknowledge that this webinar is being held on Aboriginal land and recognise the strength, resilience and capacity of Aboriginal people from this land. Pay our respects to Elders past and present, and pay our respects to all Aboriginal people who are joining us today. Welcome to our webinar. Today's webinar is an opportunity for you to get acquainted with the Human Services Agreement, or HSA, and DCJ's recontracting activities. So, what's happening to all DCJ funded service providers between now and the 1st of July 2020? You will be introduced, if not already, to the Human Services Agreement, undergo recontracting, and be part of program reforms. The Human Services Agreement is a Procurement Board prescribed template, or the standard contract for New South Wales government agencies buying human services from NGOs or the funded services sector. From the 1st of August 2017, all agencies will use the prescribed template as existing contracts expire. In DCJ, we are using the HSA for most existing contracts that are being recontracted, as well as for brand new contracts. In terms of recontracting, all expiring contracts between the 1st of July 2019 and the 30th of June 2020 will undergo the recontracting process. This process will mainly involve direct negotiations or contract discussions. There are two main ways this will happen. One, if your expiring contract is under a program level agreement, then a new HSA contract will be negotiated with you. Two, if your expiring contract is already on an HSA, then a new schedule will be negotiated with you. Just as an aside about program reforms, while we are not discussing program reforms today, you need to be aware that some programs are undergoing change. Let's find out more about the Human Services Agreement. The New South Wales Human Services Agreement is the contract New South Wales government agencies must use when commissioning human services from NGOs. The HSA sets out the standard terms and conditions that apply to NGOs who deliver human services funded by New South Wales government agencies. It is designed to make it easier for NGOs to do business with government agencies by streamlining contracting arrangements and promoting consistency across New South Wales government. The HSA is designed to be simple, user-friendly and fit for purpose. It reflects the partnership between NGOs and agencies to deliver better human services outcomes. You can access the New South Wales Procure Point webpage to find out more about the Procurement Board direction. While most new human services contracts will move to the HSA, there are a few exceptions. These include grant funding, social impact investment transactions, for example social benefit bonds, asset-based contracts or contracts with a significant asset-based component such as housing, community housing providers leasing agreements, fleet or ICT. Permanency Support Program or PSP services are currently exempt from using the HSA until June 2022. Program areas will communicate with relevant service providers directly about future recontracting processes for individual funding program areas. On this slide, we have the funding agreement in the left box and the Human Services Agreement in the right box. The funding agreement consists of a funding deed, the program level agreement and service delivery schedule. The Human Services Agreement contains standard terms, the schedule, which includes supplementary conditions, and the program specifications. Under the HSA, the standard terms replaces the funding deed. Both are overarching header agreements which outline the terms for provision of funding at a corporate level. As for the schedule, this document contains information previously outlined in the PLA and service delivery schedule. For example, performance measures, outcomes, and reporting requirements. The schedule contains DCJ contracting requirements. The HSA now consists of the standard terms, the schedule, and program specifications where appropriate. All these documents are read and executed as one contract. The standard terms is consistent across all agencies and cannot be changed without procurement board approval. The schedule can be tailored to each agency. This year, the Procurement Board approved and released a new version of the standard terms. This followed a review and consultations between government agencies and peak bodies representing the NGO sector. As a result of the feedback from the sector, the original 4 amendments to the standard terms were expanded to 8. An agreement was reached with NCOS on the final draft of the standard terms before it was submitted for approval. Further consultations will occur next year on a more in-depth review of the HSA standard terms once the recontracting has been completed. In the meantime, new funding contracts will be based on the new 2019 version of the HSA. Pre-existing contracts will be amended through a letter of variation. In the new version, there are 8 amendments to the original document. Most of the changes were made to clarify or simplify the agreement, such as the definition of officer and the term financially stable in clause 1.1. An additional clause to address security has also been added in clause 25. This clause includes how service providers must manage information and data security breaches. This is at 25.1 and 25.2. The other 5 changes are: a clause has been inserted to explicitly require providers to comply with their own constitutions at 5.2d. The conflicts of interest clause at 7.1 has been amended to require service providers to make diligent inquiries instead of a warranty. Clause 7.2 enables agencies to identify conflicts of interest to the service provider and require the provider to address them. The additional contributions clause at 9.8 has been simplified. The termination without fault notice period at clause 13.2 has increased from 45 days to 90 days. The HSA schedule describes particular information about the contract. It allows agencies to tailor some aspects of the HSA to their funding programs. It incorporates details from the program level agreement and the service delivery schedule. The HSA schedule details the information about what each funded service is contracted to deliver, such as the service types, geographic coverage, the client groups, and the outcomes to which the service will contribute. Supplementary conditions are designed to tailor the schedule to DCJ's service delivery. They incorporate some of the terms from the old funding deed which did not feature in the statewide HSA standard terms. Clause 2.1 of the standard terms outlines the order of precedence of these documents and shows that supplementary conditions can override the clauses in the standard terms. An example is Supplementary Condition 9 of the HSA schedule. This clause addresses termination without fault. Supplementary Condition 9 overrides Standard Terms Clause 13.2b, which requires 6 months written notice when terminating without fault. Resulting from sector feedback, this supplementary condition was included to provide consistent notification timeframes of 90 days across all areas where there is termination without fault. In the DCJ schedule, program guidelines are now called program specifications. The name change reflects the fact that program specifications are now attached to the schedule and therefore form part of the contract. Program specifications are specific to each program area and outline service delivery requirements. Not every funding program will have program specifications, but for those program areas that do, they will be attached to the schedule. This is where the former program guidelines differ from the HSA program specifications. Program specifications now form part of the contract and therefore take on an enhanced importance and a compliance requirement. Previously, the program guidelines sat alongside the contract to serve as a guide for service delivery. Program specifications are now part of a contractually binding document. Let's now talk about recontracting. What is the difference between recontracting and recommissioning? Recontracting involves the ceasing of an expiring contract and negotiating a new one, while recommissioning involves redesign of a program with recontracting and procurement elements. We currently have around 1,520 contracts expiring by the 30th of June 2020, with 721 service providers contracted to deliver human services in 25 programs. Some of these contracts, service providers and programs will go through the recontracting process. Let's find out which programs are affected. This table shows you the programs and their corresponding number of expiring contracts. This means they will go through the recontracting process. As you can see, Targeted Early Intervention has the most number of expiring contracts with 982. Ageing has 7, Carers 4, the Community Housing Leasing Program 5, Takandi Aboriginal Programs 1, Youth Hope 6, and Inclusion 1. Continuing on to the next slide and table, we have Specialist Homelessness Services with the most number of contracts expiring at 235. Now let's see how many contracts are affected. Not all 1,520 expiring contracts will be recontracted. In fact, the number is around 1,470. Of these, 110 are already contracted under the HSA. 454 will continue to be under a funding deed, and 908 will be first-time HSA. Note that these numbers are from account as at 30th of June 2019 and are accurate at a point in time. How does recontracting impact you as service providers? This pie chart shows the distribution of service providers by the number of expiring contracts. We have grouped the service providers with 10 or more contracts, providers who have 4 to 9 contracts, and those who have 1, 2 or 3 contracts. More than half, or 59%, of contracted service providers have only 1 contract. Only 14 service providers have more than 10 expiring contracts. The rest have somewhere between 2 and 9. Now let's talk about our recontracting plan. We have grouped the service providers into 3 categories and developed a high-level approach to recontracting. For service providers with 10 or more contracts, we aim to identify and prevent problems ahead of time. There will be high-level corporate discussions between us and you, the service provider, to confirm the recontracting approach and understand the scope. For service providers with 4 to 9 contracts, the district contract managers and program managers will assess whether there is likely to be a significant coordination or resource impact on providers. We aim to engage with providers if there is a risk. For service providers with 3 or less contracts, there will be straightforward recontracting discussions with service providers following district negotiation processes. We aim to complete the recontracting process as early as possible. Recontracting entails a lot of work, so we have to coordinate the activities. This Gantt chart shows you our high-level timeline with key activities. We are currently in the first week of November 2019. As you can see on the timeline, between October and mid-January 2020, we are developing new contracting documents. At the same time, we are holding internal and external briefings. We are also developing a schedule for district information sessions that will be available on our webpage. These briefings will go on until March next year. Some programs are planning to hold their recontracting discussions by mid-November. These discussions will go until the end of March. By mid-February to April, we are planning to start issuing and signing new contracts. This will then give us ample time to do the payment scheduling and assurance between May and June, so that we can complete the first payment run by the 1st of July 2020. What are our next steps? First is to finalise the HSA schedules and program specifications for those moving to this contract type. Second is to hold recontracting discussions. And third is to issue and sign all new contracts. There are resources available if you want further information on what has been covered in this webinar. We strongly encourage all service providers to seek legal advice and not to rely solely on these resources. You can access Justice Connect's website for information about the HSA. Please note, this is not legal advice. You can also access the Procure Point website for details on the HSA 2019 standard terms. You will receive handouts on the standard terms and funding deed comparison and standard terms amendments at your district information sessions. There is also a blank copy of the HSA standard terms for you to read through, and the guidance notes to the HSA will give you more details on navigating the HSA. You can reach us via the email address that you can see on your screen if you require further information or need any clarification. That concludes our webinar session today. Thank you all for joining us.